You're probably nervous for your first solo flight and you don't know what readiness feels like. Your first solo is going to be the most exciting thing that's ever going to happen, or it's going to be the most nerve-wracking thing that you're ever going to do in your life. Today, I want to go through what I wish I knew on my first solo, because there may have been some things that I haven't done perfectly. It's also been a little bit since I've done my first solo, so it's going to be a fun little recap for me as well. My name is Captain Ethan. It's a beautiful day to fly planes, and let's talk about your first solo, because you want to feel ready and you want to feel accomplished when it's done and not scared out of your mind sitting in an airplane by yourself. Yeah, I'm going to be flying by myself now, look. Nobody back here. So let me tell you guys a little bit of a story about my first solo and my experience with it, because I remember it pretty big. It's like one of the biggest things that I've ever done. I was nervous. I remember walking into that plane, sitting in there, I'm like, wow, I'm really in here by myself. I had my parents outside, I had my flight instructor watching me, my parents were nervous, which was making me nervous. And in that moment, I felt like maybe I'm not ready. But I was ready because my instructor signed me off. So that's thing number one. You're gonna be ready when your instructor signs you off. But what if your instructor hasn't signed you off and you're at maybe 25, 30, 35 hours and you still haven't soloed yet? I didn't solo until I was around the 30-hour mark, I think. And I really wish I got it around the 15 to 20 hour mark. I wish that's when I soloed. Let's talk about the first solo. Why does the first solo feel like it's bigger than it really is? Well, you're in an airplane by yourself. You don't have your instructor to help you out on landings, because if you struggle with landings like how I did, you gotta do them by yourself. You don't have instructor help when you're on your first solo. Everyone builds up the first solo in their head when they're in flight school as well. I remember in private training how excited and anticipating my first solo I was, doing all the studying that I could be doing, but it's a big deal. But it's not that big of a deal. The anticipation that you have for the first solo is actually worse than the flight if you're nervous about it. So, keyword, don't really be nervous about your first solo. Well, you can be nervous, but don't be too nervous, because if your instructor signs you off, you're good to go. And also trust your training and not your nerves. Everyone is trained to ACS standard or better unless you fail a check ride or a stage check, which we'll talk about that later. But trust your training and everything that you know. You have to add right rudder on takeoff, full power, climb out at VY, fly the airplane all the way down to the end of the runway on landing, flare too high. You all learn that stuff, so just trust everything that you learned. Don't do anything special or gimmicky, and you'll be okay for your first solo flight. I actually remember on my first solo flight, spoiler alert, I actually had to do a go-around. Fun little fact. That really scared the crap out of my parents. They were shaking, and then my instructor had to explain to them why I did the go-around. All right, number two, what are instructors really looking for your first solo? Because I know I'll be an instructor one day, and I've had instructors tell me this as well for my first solo. Here's what instructors want to see. They want to see good judgment and decision making. If you're not really good at making a judgment call, or you're not really that quick with making smart decisions, you're probably not going to do your first solo as soon as you want. And also, that could also affect your ability to be a pilot, so have good judgment. Also, the average amount of flight time that people usually have when they first solo is about 25 to 35 hours. So if you see people solo at 10 to 15 hours, don't feel bad about yourself for not soloing at that time, because everyone works on their own timeline. I didn't solo until I was like, I think 32 hours. But anywho, instructors are also looking for consistent flying, not just trying to be like a Part 61 cowboy up in the air. They're looking for consistency, not perfection. You're not gonna be perfect at 21 hours. You're not gonna be perfect at 35 or even 193 where I am. I know I'm not perfect for a fact with my flying. There's some things that I probably could work on that I don't know about, and I need outside mentoring to know. That's why we have flight instructors. They show you what you're doing wrong. Also, situational awareness and checklist discipline. Checklist discipline and situational awareness are gonna be the biggest ones for an instructor to sign you off on your first solo, because you can have a plane enter the pattern while you're on your first solo doing your three, I think normally they're touch and goes, but I did them full stop taxi backs. When you're in the pattern and it's another plane, you gotta be situational aware, and you also have to have the checklist discipline, because if you're not disciplined with a checklist, which instructor is going to sign you off? Also, calm reactions while under pressure. This is a big thing. This is also like the motto where my pressure washing business comes in, performing best under pressure. You really got to perform your best under pressure as well, because anything can happen in the sky. You can lose your engine, and you got to know what to do under pressure. So stay calm, cool, and collected on your first solo. This is where I talked about my go around part. Be willing to do a go around. I did my go around because I was way too shaky on landing. I was way too fast, and I was starting to porpoise a little. So I was like, okay, this is probably the best time to do a go around. And you know what would have happened if I didn't do the go around? I probably would have embarrassed myself. I probably could have broke the plane. I probably could have gotten injured or worse. So do go arounds if you need them. They're there for a reason. You're trained for them for a reason too. So what are the 3 habits that matter the most on your first solo? So there's really 3 of them. Every one of you guys have heard this saying at least 20 times in your flight training, and you probably hear it every single time that you go up in the plane. Aviate, navigate, communicate. In that order. You gotta fly the airplane, then you gotta fly the airplane where you need to go, and then you gotta communicate. So aviate always comes first, keep flying the airplane. Also stay ahead of the airplane as well. This will be a big skill to have an instrument whenever you guys get to that point, because trust me, when I went from private to instrument, it was an adjustment. I had to really stay in front of the airplane a lot. And it takes a little getting used to going from VFR to IFR, and it'll be a big adjustment going from with an instructor to without an instructor on board. I would just try to stay above the airplane as much as you can. Don't try to be perfect. Well, try to be perfect, but don't like get hard on yourself for not being too perfect. You're probably gonna be soloing about 20 to 30 hours. Again, you're not gonna be perfect. You don't have your private yet. That's okay. It's your first solo. It's your first time doing this by yourself. So don't try to chase your perfection. Do a go around if you need one, or take a little breather on the ground after you land before you go do another lap of the pattern. So here's some common mistakes before your first solo, and this is probably why your instructor is not signing you off to do your solo. And also, this is just things to know before your first solo as well. Don't try to impress your instructor, number 1. Because if you try to impress them, you're just showing a facade. That's not really who you are. And that could be dangerous as well, because if you do impress your instructor, and let's say they're like a newer instructor and they don't really recognize it, which they should recognize it because it's part of the fundamentals of instruction, they probably won't sign you off, number 1, if they're very knowledgeable. And number 2, if you're an unsafe pilot and they do sign you off, something bad could happen to you, which that's really rare to happen. I don't think I've ever heard it happen. So just don't impress your instructor. Or, I mean, I guess you can, but don't like try to do anything gimmicky. Over controlling your airplane, this is another big thing. You're not flying an A320 or a 737. You don't need these huge inputs on the controls in order to land an airplane. Be gentle. It's like riding a bicycle. Whenever you make a right turn going at high speed, do you yank the wheel all the way to the right? No. You go gradual. You're trying to be smooth. You're trying to put some finesse in it. I used to say that a lot in my old videos. I figured I'd bring it back. Letting airspeed get away from you. This is what happened on my first solo. I got way too fast on landing and I started porpoising because I was trying to set the plane down on the runway. So airspeed and energy management, yeah, it's gonna be a little bit of an adjustment because you don't really have wheel brakes in the air like how you do in a car. I mean, you do have wheel brakes on the ground like a car, but in the air, you don't really have brakes. So know your glide. Not asking questions when you're confused. This is another big one as well. I made sure after every instrument flight, I know I'm talking about instruments because I really did this for instrument a lot. I made sure to ask at least 3 questions every single flight that I did for my instrument rating. You guys should do the same thing for your first solo. Why? Because if you're confused about something, it's probably because it's important and you need to know it. And your instructor should explain it to you. Number 2, confusion is never good in this industry as well. Confusion causes a lot of errors really fast. So don't be confused. Speak up if you need to. Rushing checklists or procedures, never a good idea. You can rush your pre-flight, you can miss something, and then boom, plane crash. Not fun. And also forcing a bad landing, you don't really want to force bad landing. That's why we're trained on go-arounds. Basically from the day that we start flight school to the day that we retire, we practice them all the time. What would I practice a lot before my first solo? I'd practice go-around procedure because everything can happen really fast because you don't want to dump your flaps, you want to bring them up gradually. You want to know the procedure at the back of your hand. Crosswind landings, you don't know what the winds are going to be like exactly on your first solo day. My first solo almost got canceled because the winds were too high, quote unquote. It was like 13 knots with like a 20-degree deviance. So, or not deviance, but like from the center line to where the wind was coming from was like 20 degrees. Just have the skill for crosswind landing so you don't have to really be perfect with it. I would recommend trying to be perfect with it because I'm a perfectionist myself. Radio calls, you should probably be radio call proficient by now. If you guys are not radio call proficient, don't worry. Your boy Captain Ethan has a bunch of videos on YouTube on how to perfect your radio calls, with probably more coming soon too, because I like talking about radio calls because I'm just built different. Kind of, not really. I'm pretty good at them. It's really all about confidence if you need that secret. Church flying and flying the traffic pattern mentally. If you know you're gonna be on runway 34, practice runway 34's pattern. If it's right pattern, you already know what to do. Take off, fly your right crosswind, call your right crosswind, fly your downwind, call your downwind, fly your base, call your base, fly your final, and just chair fly it. Pretend that you're sitting in the chair like how I am, rudder pedals right there, hand on yoke, hand on power, close your eyes and just pretend that you're flying the airplane. And try to visualize it as much as you can. Emergency scenarios and what if procedures, these should be practiced just about daily and every single time you go fly. I remember when I was in flight training, my instructor would fail my engine every single time that I flew. And you know what? You learn A, B, C, D, E really fast when you do it every day. So practice your emergency procedures, your PIC when you're by yourself. You don't have your instructor's help. Inside the plane, you might have his help on the ground. So if you lose an engine at 1,000 feet, you basically have 15 to 30 seconds to put it on the ground safely. Anywho, that's about it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and let me know how your first solo goes down in the comments below. I'll be happy to hear about it. And also comment down below if you haven't done your first solo. What makes you nervous about it? Be happy to know down in the comments below. Hit that like and that subscribe button if you guys are new, and we'll see you guys in another video.